Lindsey Graham tried to embarrass Jasmine Crockett. Her response left him frozen. The room was tense. The Senate chamber's air conditioning hummed faintly, but everyone could still feel the heat of anticipation. Cameras rolled, reporters hunched over their laptops, and staffers whispered in hushed tones. It was supposed to be just another hearing, a chance for politicians to spar over policy and get a few soundbites for the evening news. But today was different. At the center of it all sat Jasmine Crockett, young, sharp, and unapologetically passionate. She had become known for her unwavering defense of the voiceless and her ability to cut through political theater with facts and compassion. On the opposite side sat Senator Lindsey Graham, a seasoned veteran of political jousts who'd made a career out of cornering his opponents with loaded questions. And today, Lindsey had his sights set on her. "Congresswoman Crockett," he began, leaning back in his chair with that half-smile that always preceded a verbal trap, "since you seem to have all the answers about justice and fairness, perhaps you can explain why your proposals keep costing taxpayers billions. Do you think hard-working Americans should foot the bill for your idealism?" There it was, the bait. The question designed to make her stumble, flinch, or, at the very least, get defensive. The cameras zoomed in, waiting to capture the first sign of discomfort. Jasmine didn't even blink. She folded her hands on the desk, glanced briefly at the crowd, and then, she smiled. "Senator Graham," she said softly, "I could give you numbers, charts, and long-winded explanations. But let me tell you a story instead." The room shifted. He hadn't expected that. Stories weren't part of the script. She began. 2 years ago, in a little town in Texas, I met a single mother named Carla. She worked 2 jobs. Daycare worker by day, diner waitress by night. She paid her taxes, never missed a payment on her tiny apartment, and still, she couldn't afford to take her son to the doctor when he developed a cough. Why? Because his inhaler was $300, and the choice was between medicine or rent. Her voice didn't rise in anger, it fell in quiet gravity. So she gave him tea and prayed it was enough. That little boy ended up in the one night, struggling to breathe. And the cost of that emergency visit? 10 times the price of the inhaler. 10 times, Senator. The room was utterly still. Now, you ask me if hardworking Americans should foot the bill for programs like affordable healthcare, better wages, and safe housing. Senator, they already are. They're paying with their health, with their futures, with their children's lives. The difference is, I want them to get something back for it. Her words hung in the air like a slow echo. Lindsey shifted in his chair. The cameras caught it. A small, almost imperceptible frown, like someone realizing they'd just been outmaneuvered without a single jab thrown. But Jasmine wasn't finished. "You see," she continued, her tone gentle now, "we get so caught up in budgets and headlines that we forget these numbers are people. I've seen the eyes of veterans who've served our country but can't afford a warm bed. I've held the hands of seniors who skip meals so their grandkids can eat. And I've spoken to children who think dreaming big is only for the rich. That, Senator, is why I fight for these policies, not because I'm some idealist, but because I believe in an America where dignity isn't a luxury." Something in her voice softened the air in the room. Even a few staffers, usually immune to emotional appeals, seemed to pause. Then came the twist. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes meeting his without flinching. "And I know, Senator, that you care too. I've read about your own upbringing, how your family struggled after your parents passed. You know what it's like to see the odds stacked against you. So I have to ask, is this really about disagreeing with my plan, or is it about finding a better one together?" A murmur rippled through the chamber. Lindsey's face, usually so controlled, revealed a flash of something, memory, maybe, or recognition. For the first time that morning, he didn't have a quick comeback. Instead, he cleared his throat, adjusted his papers, and muttered, "Well, I think we can agree on helping people." It wasn't a concession exactly, but it was something. And in politics, that something was huge. The hearing moved on, but the energy had shifted. Reporters no longer typed in a frenzy, they listened. The other senators seemed a little more measured in their questions. And when Jasmine left the room later, she was met not with the usual flurry of reporters shouting for a soundbite, but with quiet nods and handshakes, even from across the aisle. Outside, as she walked down the Capitol steps, she spotted a woman waiting by the barricade. It was Carla, the mother from her story, holding her son's hand. The boy waved shyly. "I saw you on TV," Carla said, her voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you for remembering us." Jasmine bent down to the boy's level, smiling. "It's my job to make sure you get to dream big," she said. And that's when the boy grinned, holding up a tiny toy inhaler his mom had bought him as a playful reminder that he could breathe easy now. Sometimes, the loudest victories aren't won through shouting, but through empathy that disarms even the sharpest attacks. In the end, Lindsey Graham didn't walk away humiliated, he walked away reminded. And maybe, just maybe, that was the bigger win. Because change doesn't always come from winning an argument, sometimes, it comes from winning a heart. Jasmine stayed by the barricade for a moment, chatting with Carla and her son. The boy, his name was Mateo, was full of questions. "Do you really work in that big building?" he asked, pointing to the Capitol dome with wide eyes. "I do," Jasmine said, crouching down so they were eye level. "And everything I say in there, I say for kids like you." Carla wiped her eyes discreetly. She didn't want to cry in front of the cameras lingering nearby, but she also couldn't hide the pride swelling in her chest. Just 2 years ago, she had felt invisible, unseen by the people who made the rules. And now, her story had been told in front of the entire nation. As Jasmine stood to leave, a young reporter from a small town paper broke through the crowd, not to ask about politics but something else entirely. "Congresswoman, you could have torn Senator Graham apart in that hearing," she said. "Why didn't you?" Jasmine paused, her smile faint but deliberate. "Because the goal isn't to tear people apart," she replied. "It's to build something better. You can't build bridges with broken pieces." The reporter scribbled furiously, clearly knowing she'd just been handed her headline. Later that evening, the clip from the hearing began circulating online. It wasn't the heated exchanges or political drama that people were sharing, it was the quiet moment when Jasmine reminded Lindsey Graham of his own struggles. The video was captioned, "She didn't just win the argument, she changed the conversation." Messages began pouring in from across the country. A teacher in Ohio wrote to say her students had watched the exchange in class, and that it sparked a discussion about empathy in politics. A retired veteran in Florida sent a letter saying, "I've disagreed with you for years, but today, you reminded me what leadership is supposed to look like." Even more surprising, a small, handwritten note arrived at Jasmine's office 2 days later. It was from Lindsey Graham himself. It read simply, "Thank you for the reminder. Let's talk." Jasmine kept that note tucked into a folder on her desk, not as a trophy, but as proof that sometimes, the quiet victories matter the most. A week later, she and Lindsey co-sponsored a bipartisan proposal to cap the cost of life-saving medications for children. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't everything she wanted. But it was a start. And starts are how change begins. By the time spring rolled around, Mateo's asthma was under control, Carla had been able to cut down to one job, and the story that began in a Senate hearing had rippled into living rooms across America. Jasmine knew there would be more battles ahead, more moments where people tried to corner her with clever words. But she also knew that the power of a well-told truth could stop even the sharpest attack in its tracks. In the end, the lesson wasn't just for Lindsey Graham or for the cameras, it was for everyone watching, from Texas to Toronto, from small-town diners to busy city streets. That kindness isn't weakness, that compassion can be the most disarming weapon of all, and that real leadership is less about winning the room, and more about touching a heart.